if you train your body, right? If you believe in fitness, then you need to understand that body and mind is connected. You have to train the mind. And the only way that you reach a level of fulfillment and happiness is you train the mind.
Okay, welcome back, or welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, by trade and training a high-performance psychologist. I'm stoked to welcome back a legend to the podcast for this week's conversation, Tu Lam. Tu is the real deal. He's a literal video game character, and we're talking about Call of Duty, not The Sims. His 2+ decades in the military, 22 years in special operations, make him an obvious choice, but it's his extraordinary warrior spirit, his inherent resolve in the face of adversity to live completely aligned with his values. Early tragedy, an upbringing of horror and hopelessness, and years of combat and subsequent PTSD never hardened Tu. Instead, the hardships of his past only cemented his desire to serve humanity. He's a retired Green Beret, a tactical weapons expert, a highly skilled martial artist, and the founder of his company, Ronin Tactics. With loyalty, courage, and honor at the core of who he is, Tu shows us what fuels the best kind of fighters. In this conversation, you'll hear from a true warrior, but make no mistake about it, this is a conversation about love. Tu was one of our guests back in 2017, and I am so excited to reintroduce him to you, and I can't wait for you to hear his story, and perhaps even more importantly, how he tells it. With emotion and authenticity and truth, with deep courage and discernment. Tu is a special human, and I think we all have something to learn from his approach to life. So with that, let's jump right into this week's conversation with Tu Lam. Tu, I'm so happy to have you here, mate.
Thank you.
We had a conversation in 2017 that was unbelievable, and it left an imprint on me. I don't normally ask this question. I haven't asked this question to anybody on the podcast, but you have lived a life, and the way that you've lived your life, I think warrants this type of depth coming right out of the gates here. What is your best understanding for the meaning of life?
I mean, I think like that's the ultimate question, right? Since man, humanity reached a certain level of consciousness. When I say that we came from a species, right? And then somehow we reached a higher level of consciousness in the evolution of man, right? So life, that question, like what is the meaning of life? As a Green Beret, I traveled the world. As a warrior, I traveled the world, 27 countries. I live with the people, indigenous populations. I ran into the rain jungles and hunted down creatures, running with the A-teams. Mm. And, one of the biggest thing was, what is the meaning of life? Climbing the highest mountains of the Himalayas, I searched for the meaning of life, like sitting with Tibetan monks, feeling the vibration of, they call it oneness, and, going through Europe and seeing the crusades and the tombs. And so what I feel is that there was one thing I learned that connected us all in our religions, in our humanness and oneness. There was one thing I learned, and that was love, man. Like, that is love. Like, love is the highest frequency and vibration of the universe. So you ask me what life is, it goes back to the highest vibration that created all things.
Wow, look, I would not have expected you to go to that word.
Yeah. So when I search for the meaning of life, life is beyond thought. You know, when I say that is like in today's world, we look at things, we form a narrative, you know, based off on our senses of sight, sound, smell, a belief that, you know, we grew up around. But life is beyond that. You ever sat in the stillness of the morning and you focus on breath? It's beyond thought that morning. You know, you can't put a word on it because it's always been here. You know, if you want to know what life is, it's to feel. It's to feel, like to live from the heart. Like, you know, there's, you know, in the teachings of spirituality, they talk about there's three minds, right? You got the heart, you got the gut, and then you got the brain, the thoughts. And the thoughts is, you know, really an illusion. It's based off of your narrative of where you've been, you know. And the reason why I'm saying this is where I've been was oppression, murder. You know, I was born in war, you know, so my meaning of life was a different angle than the average Westerner these days, you know. I was born in war. I was born on a cold cement floor in Saigon hospital. My mother shielded my body from incoming artillery fire on the morning of my birth. At that stage of the Vietnam War, you know, American troops left Vietnam and I was born on that losing side of the war. We lived underneath communist occupation till I was 3 years old. You know, like you think about like Afghanistan, right? The news footage, people hopping on planes and literally throwing their bodies from airplane, trying to escape. Ukraine, you know, we see news footage of them loading up trains and just trying to leave country before the war hit them. Can you imagine Vietnam? Can you imagine the chaos?
Mm.
You know, there's images of families escaping off of rooftops with, you know, helicopters landing, you know, in Vietnam. People holding on to skids of a helicopter, you know. People walked out to neighboring countries. And I want to say this is, you know how many landmines are through those jungles? And yet they're willing to walk out of a country.
What's the emotion that you are working from right now, recapping? And as I'm watching you reliving this horror.
There's a shadow in me.
Yeah.
You know, and that shadow was forged in war, you know. Death.
Yeah.
And, you know, that shadow became this commando, you know, to fight against that oppression. But the thing is, when I think back to that level of hopelessness, like, have we lost connection with humanity, like each other, where we don't care for one's life, you know? To watch families like murdered, sold into slavery, you know? Like for me and my family, we escaped on by sea. 400,000 refugees die by sea. And there we were, loaded up on the bottom deck of a small little fishing boat. And, you know, we had to escape the piracy, the seas, and, you know, navigation to Malaysia. And when we finally made it to Malaysia, they didn't accept any more refugees. So they strapped us back and pulled us back out into the South China Sea, cut the line and shot the motor.
How old were you?
3 years old. And left us there to die, you know. 30 days, we drifted. The dead was thrown overboard.
Your dad?
The dead.
The dead were thrown?
Yeah.
Were you with your mom and your dad?
I was with my mom and my biological father and my brother. We were left for dead.
How many others?
They said around 100 others were on that boat.
Mm-hmm.
They took food off of the boats to make more room for refugees. And I want you to think about Afghanistan, like how desperate those people were. So, you know, in our situation, people were willing to load their whole families up in these small little fishing boats, knowing that piracy happens. These pirates from surrounding countries would stop the boats and board the boats, kill the men, rape the women, enslave the children. They made a profit off of it, and it was easy. So we had to navigate past that, and then finally we were not accepted in the country, pushed out into the South China Sea, left for dead. And, and somehow we survived by the grace of God. We survived. And then we had to endure a year and a half in the refugee camps where thousands of refugees died from diseases and starvation. In the refugee camps, you're living in the jungles. So, at 3, I was laying on a dirt floor with some grass hut, And finally, we made it to the land of the free, only to be spit on, flicked off, called by racist names. So the thing was like, you asked about life, that was my 0 to 7. And, when I say that 0 to 7, it's like, if you study neuroscience, 0 to 7 is when the subconscious mind is programmed. And it's within those ages when you're unconsciously forming a narrative of the world and who you are and your place. 0 to 7, that was my 0 to 7. So statistically, you see, like in today, the study of mental health today, statistically, if a child experienced trauma from 0 to 7, they have a hard time in life.
That's right.
But, what do you do when you see that much trauma from 0 to 7? So, I want to address this is that's what you need. I needed that. I needed to feel that.
Feel what?
That level of hopelessness, survival. I needed to feel that level of hate in humanity, because there was a choice at a stage in my life where I was able to take that hate and made it into strength. That weakness that I felt from a refugee boy, there was a certain point during my growing up process where I'm like, I'm more than this. And that's where, when you face that, you face your struggle, then you're reprogramming those 0 to 7 years old. It's not too late, right? So if you're facing trauma from 0 to 7, you're falling underneath a statistic that you're not going to make it in life. You're going to be messed up in life, not be able to, you're going to be a drug addict or whatever, right? That's a statistic. Well, what if I tell you, you need that energy in order to propel you to be something more? Okay, so that goes against survivor's mind. So as hunter-gatherers, going back to caveman days, right? We had to have a survival mind. You're sitting across from me because your ancestors did something right to put you here in front of me today. Survival was the number one thing back in the hunter-gatherer days. I know this because I live with the primitive tribes. I connected with the land, We're in a world now that we're so disconnected. Me running with rebel forces, living in rain jungles, I connected with the primitive people. So I know what it means to chase survival at that primitive state, right? So survival, man, like that's a powerful thing, because in today's world, our survival is what? We were given everything, right? So, I mean, like, it's not really hard. We know we're going to have dinner on our table that night. So what is your survival these days? And that's where we're going to that mental health crisis in America, because, people don't understand that our minds are programmed like that, a survival mindset. We are human beings, an animal species, right? With a higher level of consciousness, of course. But if you're able to go against your fear, so as a refugee boy who lost everything and was spit on, called by many racist names, like to choose to go back into these countries and to fight for the oppressed, that goes against survival, doesn't it?
It does.
So in today's world, if you want to be anything more, then it goes against survival. You have to be willing to die for what you believe. And the code of Bushido, the way of the warrior, an ancient code of ethics of the samurai, is to readily accept death for a higher purpose.
There's two things that I'm struck by. The first is the way that you're able to feel as much as you're feeling and still access thinking in a way that is clear. So I'm watching you travel back to hopelessness and horror and trauma and feel it in your body to its fullness. And at the same time, balance the ability to think and to be eloquent with your thinking patterns. So how are you doing that right now? I think what I'm watching and feeling is the thing that makes you special. And I want to get into, of course, like the higher order purpose of life. I want to get into the way that you work with fear. I want to get into the decision moment where you said, I am more than this. I think that there's some other phrase that you said, it's something like that. How are you doing what you're doing right now?
You know, in religion, they call it surrender, right? In Taoism is to flow with the Tao, right? It's Wu Wang, to flow. You know, and the thing is, I surrender to my emotions because it's trapped emotions that's inside of me, and it moves through my body when I inject a thought, because thought is tied to emotion. So if I'm telling you a story that happened in my life, that emotion is going to surface. I understand this. And I allow that emotion to move through me like water.
How do you do that? Because I think what we're doing right now, what you're doing, all I'm doing is holding a space with you. But what you're doing is what strength is. What you're doing is that space between vulnerability and risk and authenticity. Like it's that unique triangle of whether I flow or I'm just trying to like manage and control something. And so this is what I think leaders need to understand. And the old image, which I thought maybe you would have had more of the old image. So I'm feeling something very different than I expected, which I'm so like, I love all of this too, is this old idea, numb your emotions, that shit gets in the way. There's no time to operate in environments of risk or consequence when you have emotions on board. And so you can't be a great operator or even a great human because emotions are so noisy and they're too difficult to deal with. And that old image is obviously problematic. And you and I could have long conversations about it. How are you doing this? How did you come to be able to have this type of richness in the way that you work with your emotions?
They call it muscle memory in the gun world, right? When you practice a move, muscle memory, you know, in special forces, you're moving through tactics, muscle memory, you build muscle memory. The samurais, they set a term called mushin.
No mind.
A state of no mind. You see a lot of athletes have that state. It's the state of no mind, as in we dump thoughts. Okay, because thoughts are tied to emotion. So if I'm going on to a bad guy's house and I know he has, 4 or 5 positions in a house, he has multiple combatants in that house, highly armed, suicide vests. They're willing to die because you understand why they're fighting for their cause. They're willing to die for what they believe. So are you. You're willing to die for what you believe, right?
How many times have you been in that exact moment you're describing?
War, I mean, it's the 20-year war. So, I served at special operations level. So we go after the worst people, right? We get the best intelligence, and we're going after a national target. So, when you're going in and that they're heavily armed and they may outgun you initially until you get, your support, assault positions in place. So, you make that initial assault, there's supporting assault, there's exterior assault. So the thing is, you have to get certain guns in certain places to take advantage of that terrain. If I'm stuck on emotion of thought, which is, I'm going to fucking die, then that emotion will surface, right? Because your thoughts are tied to emotion. So in special operations, we're taught to breathe. And there's certain breathing sequence that we do to ground ourselves of thought, separate ourselves from thought, and to move emotion through your body so you can be present to perform. And then the state of Mushin is, you've done it so much, your body is not thinking. You react, but you react in clarity because there's no emotion present, So when you ask me how do I separate, it's just that. It's emotion. It's present. You could feel it. You could feel my energy sitting across from me. But I'm present with you. There's a separation. It's not tied so much together.
It's interesting you say separation, because I would have thought more there was a harmony.
Ah, yeah, I like that word. Yes.
Yeah, like you're not run over by your thoughts and emotions, but you figured out how to work in the slipstream.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you're if I tie it together, there's a posture that you have that I'm going to surrender, but it's not a surrendering in what many people would think on bent knee, right? There's a surrendering to acceptance.
Yes.
Is that more accurate? Like, I'm accepting that I've got emotions on board. I'm accepting that I can work with emotions. I might fall into 1,000 pieces, but that's okay too. But here I am. I'm reliving a moment of horror, stories of horror in my life. And so wouldn't it be weird if I didn't have emotions?
Yes. So in the understanding of yin and yang, right? The polar energy that created all things. So when I say that is the polar energy, positive, negative, right? It's all one in the same. Life, death, it's all one.
Is yin yang a first principle for you?
Yin Yang is a philosophy that so when people ask me, like, what's a principle? What is a religion? What's a philosophy? I travel the world, so I saw religion in some multiple angles, right? Do I believe in God, the creator? Yes.
You do.
Right? I do. And I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe it. But I also have a different angle on life too. I saw things, right? I saw things. I felt things, like I said, there's one thing that connected us all in our humanness. It was in religion is love. Like, look, man, that's the highest vibration in this universe. If you believe in energy, you should, like, we are energy. Scientists have proved it, right? We're just in this flesh right now, but we are energy. So energy is endless, right? Is eternal. And where did that energy come from? It was always here, right? So what I'm saying is we separated ourselves from what is truth. And I feel like we chase an illusion in today's world, as in, I have to be accepted by you. You have to like me. I have to get this raise. I need to live this life. I have to please this person because they are, this person in my life, we trap ourselves, in doing that.
Where do you think the fear of rejection, the craving for acceptance, plays a role in the modern human experience?
Oh, yeah. What a great, I truly think it's programmed in us and handed down through the generations of our ancestors. going to the hunter-gatherer days. You think about, like, we're hunter-gatherers, right? We're a tribe. We live in a tribe. We run in a tribe. Everybody's going to do their share within this tribe, or you get booted out of the tribe. So it's embedded. It's a survival thing. Like, you have to like me because I don't want to get booted out of this tribe, because back then it was survival. But what is survival nowadays? But we're still having that brain, right? That was wired the same. It's wired the same, right? I mean, there's scientists that scan the brain and it's wired the same way. And the thing is, what is survival nowadays? It's not, we don't live in these hunter-gatherer tribes. So acceptance, right, is programmed in our subconscious from the moment we're born, handed down to us through generations of survival. That's why I care what you think, because my life depended on it when we were hunter-gatherers.
As a man that's aware of the power of the brain from generations ago, like deeply embedded in a generational DNA kind of pass through, and your awareness that that's happening on a regular basis, and your deep desire to live the higher consciousness, the highest form that you possibly can. Like, how do you manage that yourself? This need, and I'll be explicit here, this craving to be accepted, this fear of rejection, balanced with wanting the freedom from that. How do you uniquely do it?
So it goes back to, like, you know, when I was abandoned, I was told I was nothing, I was spit on, I was left for dead, all those experiences, all those emotions, right? I felt them. I felt that emotion. And what I give back to the world is love. I wasn't accepted. I know what it feels to not be accepted. I'm going to give you acceptance. Right. I was oppressed. I was enslaved, but I'm going to free you from oppression, because I know that energy. You know, I know what it means to live like that. So that goes into yin and yang. Like, what you receive, that's your narrative, but you can give back something else. And that can only be done in the present moment.
A high percentage of people that go through trauma, some sort of abuse that they've experienced, there's a healthy percentage that re-abuse. They find another way to abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And a smaller percentage are able to work with that abuse to do what you're doing. And so can you speak to folks that have had trauma, which big T, little t, I think no one's getting through this world without it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak right into people that are struggling at some point in their life right now, where they're hanging on to their survival mechanisms from the trauma that they had when they were younger? Can you speak right to them in a way that might just be able to knock some of that calcium off, some of that scar tissue that's been keeping them stuck?
Yeah, you know, trauma, it holds us down. It scars us. You know, it traps us from living a life that's really true to being anything more than who we are today. Like, trauma.
Wait, what does that mean? It holds us back from being anything
more than who you are today. Like, if you're living today in addictions, trying to fill the void of this trauma, you're not going to be anything more than that.
That statement has so much hope, and it does not sound like airy-fairy, new agey. You know, that is such a grounded thought, that the way you just said it. You say it one more time so I can.
Yeah, you'll never be anything more than who you are today.
That's rad, because the opposite of that is
you can be more. If you believe in God, if you believe in a creator, right? Creation was created from the heart, not from thoughts, from the heart. And if you understand, like, that at the root of your being, then, man, you're not going to give hate to the world.
What if you don't have a foundation of a creator, an omniscient?
Well, I didn't at one point in my life. You know, I was, you know, I was a refugee. I wasn't introduced to religion. I wasn't like raised in a normal westernized family of religion. I wasn't introduced to any of it. I didn't believe in it. And I joined the military, and I served a code of Bushido, but that's like war and combat. And, I felt like that's what I deserved anyways, but I didn't know at the time I was giving back.
So the hopelessness and the horror and the trauma you experienced, you made a decision that there's more to me than living a hopeless life, one of internal violence, maybe external violence, but coming from that place of rage, you said, or hopelessness and rage. Those are like on the opposite sides of the same expression of trauma, hopelessness and rage, right?
Yeah.
So somehow you said there's more. And how did you navigate to eventually become a Green Beret?
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously working in the elite ranks of the Green Beret special operator community.
So, when I was young, a teenager, I was a big Bruce Lee fan. Right. During that age, I was a Bruce Lee fan.
Yeah, right.
And beside his martial arts, he would talk about Taoism, the way. Right. And that turned me on to Lao Tzu, which was...
Okay. So I want to pause before we go further. So how do you read the Tao Te Ching?
What do you mean, how do I read
So
it?
the 81 principles there.
Yes.
Do you read it by yourself and meditate, or do you read it in a community with others?
Good question. It's about oneness with all things. If you're sitting in a room full of other people's thoughts, then you are avoiding your own thoughts, right? It's oneness. So for me, how I read is I read a paragraph, and it's really deep.
It's so flippant. It's, 81. You know where I'm going with 81, right? Infinity, infinity,
yeah.
like the whole thing. And we don't even know if Lao Tzu was like a real human.
Yeah.
But the wisdoms in that thing are like, it's pretty radical. So I hear you talk about God and Jesus Christ, and I'm assuming that there's a Christian orientation, and then you're introducing Taoism, and the practices of, I think you're going to say meditating, per poem, per page, per whatever. And so, what are they called? What is each 81 principles?
Yeah,
principles. No, are they principles?
Yes, principles.
So you do it by yourself?
Yes.
Holy shit! Like, I get so lost in it. Like, I feel like I need to talk through. Okay, what do you mean when you hear the 10,000 things? Like, when you think about the shadows of the moon, the 10,000 moons, and not the one moon, the source. Like, I want to have conversations about it, but you do it more of an introverted process.
Yeah. Like,
so let's do the 10,000 moons or 10,000 lakes for just a moment. They're the reflections of the one. And so it's easy to be confused by the reflections of the one, the 10,000 lakes or 10,000 moons, the reflections of the moons in the lake. What is your primary practice to be connected to the one source, which all things turn to one, which is the yin yang. It's also the way, if you will.
Lao Tzu says that within the empty spaces in a room is what makes the room useful.
That's right.
So to be able to sit in the place of void, and when I say that, it's to empty your mind. Okay. So when I say, imagine you're sitting there and you're going to a breathing technique.
What cadence is your favorite?
My breathing technique goes into my lower abdominal region. I'm breathing from the gut. I'm breathing in my nose. I'm holding, right? Usually it's about 4-second hold. I'm exhaling out to 8 to 10 seconds, going into the lower abdominal, my gut. So let me explain how this works. Majority of the world as human beings, we shallow breathe. We breathe from our lungs. We don't breathe into, we don't breathe into our lower abdominal area. And as a human species, that's where energy, right? Trapped energy is stored. So if you have stress, you're going to push that down through suppressants, right? Suppression. And that's done through suppressants like alcohol, drugs, momentary addictions, or repression, which is done unconsciously, both pushing down that emotion to your lower abdominal region. How can you ever move energy unless you breathe into that lower abdominal?
100%.
Right. So,
100%.
in, my practice of breathing, I train with the Indian commandos, up in the Himalayas. So I had, personal practice with Tibetan monks on breathing and understanding at that level, oneness. So breathing into the lower abdomen, you ask me, how do I reach that level of oneness? First, you have to follow breath. And then you have to empty thought, no thoughts. And then when you sit with emotion, which is your lower abdominal, you breathe into your lower abdominal and you're pushing out that emotion. Imagine there's no thought, there's no emotion.
Motion.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so the way that mechanically that works for me is I say yes, yes, yes to everything you're saying, is that it's a singular focus on the one thing.
Yes.
And then that one thing is the inhale.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, it's almost like it becomes its own mantra. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of get lost in the simplicity of that deep focus.
Yes.
And the three S's, stillness, silence, stillness, and space is like those three. I find it faster than I was able to yesterday or 10 years ago at that junction between exhale and inhale. So it's almost like a drug for me. So at that junction where there's a stillness at the bottom and there's like a oxygen dioxide exchange that's happening. And it almost feels, my first teacher, this was 20 some years ago, said to me, he saw this, this is 25 years, I guess. No, 1997. How long ago was that? I can't do the math that fast. He says, Mike, this is like a full body orgasm. You just don't realize it yet. And so as a young kid, I was like, what is that? Do you, when I say full body orgasm, do you have any relationship to that? Or does that feel like it's totally different?
No, you actually go to a state of joy.
Yeah.
Right. It's what I call it, a state of joy. And that's a state of our being. Like, when you think about any religion, they say, the state of your being is happiness. Like if you're able to go to that state of being, right. And when I say that, it's like, let go of thought, let go of, like, breathe out emotion, let go of thought. You don't have anything in you anymore that's like human created, right? Like, why don't you like, I don't like that tea mug right here. Why? Because some narrative was formed in my subconscious many years ago. Why I don't like that color. Something happened there, right? So imagine like letting go of that narrative, letting go of it all, like just letting it go and just sitting in your root of your being. Like that's where joy is.
You and I are going to like be able to vibe on this for a long time. And somehow there's a challenge that I have of how do you, I'll put it back to you. Like, how do you create a pull or a draw for people to want to have that type of stillness and experience within themselves? Do you just square up like in a way that says you can't have what you want unless you go and work for stillness? Or do you do it more eloquently?
I just share my story. I share my story of like where I came from. I came from like the dirt floors of a refugee camp, sleeping with the rats. Like that's where I came from. And then I made, a brand, a name for myself after I got out of the military, after serving our country. Like, isn't that the American dream?
Yeah.
To be able to like
part of it.
come from like nothing and then now be this successful, tasting fame and tasting success and just running a very successful company with my wife. But what was really weird was like I achieved that state really fast, like success.
How do you define it?
Success in my eyes back then was rich, right? You got to be rich. You got to live in a big house and drive. That was my illusion that I lived in because that was the narrative that was given to me. Look, we were refugees. We came from nothing. So what my parents gave me as a success was don't starve. like money is everything because they lost everything. So that narrative was handed to me. And imagine I reached that state and I wasn't happy. Like I was happy that, I was able to be something more, but I wasn't happy at the root of my being. Right. And then that started my like entrepreneurship as in, I needed to travel around the United States and train people. And I need to like, if I believe in like communities and I believe in like, fighting against active shooters and I need to train these police officers. I need to train the community on how to defend themselves because I was a Green Beret and I force multiply armies.
So do you link success with purpose?
I do. Like, I feel like success comes with multiple angles, right? In this materialistic world, we need to live off of the energy of yang, which is, man, we need to be aggressive, right? We need to live with a purpose. We have to be type A, driven. That's yang. Like that's in this physical world of materialistic things. But there's yin, which is a spirit world that we're all connected to eternally, right? And we need to develop that too, because in the energies of yin and yang, if you put too much emphasis on one thing, it's going to fail. That's why it's all one and the same. You have to have one or you can't have the other.
There you go. So you practice both.
I practice both.
How do you help people understand their purpose? And I want to move to your principles of life, your first principles of life that, you're writing about. But how do you help people understand their purpose?
A lot of people come from difficult backgrounds, right? So who I teach the military, I speak law enforcement. A lot of them, they come from, broken households, so they have their traumas. And what I teach, the community as well, the people is that you take that pain, you take that neglect, right? You take that, people putting you down and saying you're not good. You take that energy and you turn it into something more because creation is found within you.
So you want to teach people to take it.
Well, you need to feel it.
Look at that.
You need to, you don't have
There's
to.
a level of sophistication here that.
If you give me a present
Okay.
that makes me better as a human being, will I say thank you to you?
Mm-hmm.
So the universe gives you a present in suffering and hardships, and it made you into the successful entrepreneur that the world looks up to in life, right? In happiness. Why not say thank you?
That squares up deeply with this idea that is very Buddhist in principle, which is to know suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, you just can't quite work with real compassion. So, and I'm oversimplifying, a beautiful ancient tradition. That's a big part of your life and your life approach is to embrace suffering. And you're calling it a gift. And many that experience suffering, myself included for a long time, didn't want anything to do with it. It was too much. It was overwhelming. And I didn't have your suffering. I had different experiences in my life and would never try to compare. But the idea that to sit with the discomfort and the prickliness of that and the heaviness of that, you're suggesting is the gift.
If I didn't experience that, I wouldn't have the strength to change. Like I wouldn't have the emotion and the pain to be something more.
So do you have kids?
No.
Would you want your kids to have the level of suffering you had?
No.
Okay, so where's the threshold for the amount or intensity, the duration or intensity of suffering that I agree with you. And so, but I'm confused because I'm giving my son all the things that I didn't have.
Mm.
And hopefully the things that I did get, I'm also giving him. But I'll tell you a phrase that an athlete shared with me that I vibe with, but it's not accurate in whole for me. As I said, he's a professional athlete, multiple championships that he won. I said, how's life? And he said, it's pretty good. He's a basketball player. And I said, how are the kids? And he said, they're good. And I kind of paused. I said, what does that mean? He said, they've got the best shoes, the best private coaches, all the right camps. He's doing great in basketball. He likes it. But the one thing I can't give him is nothing. I can't give them the thing that I came from, which was nothing. And so I can't relate at the depth of that statement, but I can relate to the spirit of it.
Mhm.
And so when you hear me talk about this,
Mhm.
can you frame the level or intensity of suffering that you would hope a child would be able to experience to live the good life?
Well, unfortunately, I understand that's the process, right? You need to suffer to be anything more, right?
Mm.
Like if you go to the gym and you're working out in the gym, you're going to need to hit muscle failure where that lactic acid is going to build to tear down that muscle group to build into anything more. But the thing is, as a human being, I don't want people to suffer because I understand that we're all one and the same, That's the hardest thing for me is like to look at other people and to judge. Now, I used to judge a lot, right? I had to in special forces. You're a threat, you're not. I had to judge. It was life dependent, and that skill set was refined. I had to judge. I was reconnaissance, right?
Mm.
But the thing in today's world now, who I am today, successful entrepreneur, and husband, and and beating the statistics of a veteran, what a veteran is, after at the spec ops level, my thing
Explain to folks what spec ops means.
at the special operations level is that, we are a national asset. We are what the country relies on when we have terrorist group attack our countries, when we have attacks against our homeland. We are the ones under night vision that will go into the country covertly, find, fix, and kill the enemy, at that level.
Mm-hmm.
If I was compared, that's the NFL level, in the military, you are the top.
Mm-hmm.
So at that level, I had to judge people.
What do you think made you special that you went the distance there?
I was willing to die for what I believe. And I
And
goes,
what do you believe?
what do I believe?
I was willing to die for what I believe in.
Yeah.
And what was that?
It's the values of my beliefs, like God, family, country, but the values that the Bushido Code encompass, compassion was spearheaded at all, like compassion.
So how does that square with the violence that that you were engaging in?
Yeah. So, that's the thing is like humanity is like, it's going to be war. It's going to be conflict. I came from war. I was oppressed, and the thing is like my violence that I inflict to our enemies was in the teachings of Bushido. Bushido, bu means to stop the spear, to intercept the spear. I intercept what the enemy does to humanity. As in, in Bunamajita, Cameroon, we're fighting the Chad rebels because they're coming in, killing wildlife. They're killing these animals, taking their ivory, taking their legs to fund their terrorist training camps. We're stopping that Bushido to stop the spear, right? So in that aspect, and in the teachings of the samurai, where he said, if you have a man that oppresses thousands and tortures thousands of his people, hundreds of thousands of his people, tortures them, oppresses them, and you take out that one man, did you not save the hundreds and thousands of lives? So in my understanding of warriors, I understand the polar energies of the universe. Without darkness, there will never be light. There will never be light. Like without evil, we would never know what it means to be good. The contrast. But my eternal soul chooses light. I choose to walk in the light. And what the world gives me in oppression and hate, and I return back in the light. And that's understanding how the universe works,
Was there a moment in time that happened for you, or was it a slow drip eventually where you said, I'm more comfortable, or I feel more aligned with the light? Because we could also create a narrative where you are one of the leaders of the dark. And some people would maybe consider you, a leader of dark because their value systems are exactly opposite or in contrast. Like this is a complicated thought, right? Like there's two questions. Let me separate them out. And the first question is, was there an experience that took place like a lightning bolt, or was it a slow drip of experiences that led you to the light?
The slow drip came from being dark. Like,
Yeah.
finally going to what it means to be dark in that space of hate. Like, to understand how to hate the enemy at that level where, you see your teammates die, like you're fighting a war, multiple conflict areas, 20-year war. You see the worst in humanity. You see women and children being tortured by the enemy. And you see war at that level of humanity.
So you made the light decision.
I became dark.
So prior to Green Beret or post?
I feel like a warrior is the light, right? Like,
Yeah.
to reach that state of what it means to be a warrior, to protect, like the Kshatriyas, the ancient Hindu system, like the warrior class has a dharmic path within this lifetime.
What does that word mean? Dharma.
Yeah,
Dharmic path.
The cosmic law, right?
That's right. Yep.
If you go against that, you will pay in karma for eternity, right?
That's right.
In Western religion, we call it hell, right? We have a value that we have to, So the warrior is the light, like to pursue that. But then war, which is hate, and hate is a powerful tool. Like hate will when that explosive happens on the door, you have to go in, you have to kill that enemy. Hate is a powerful energy. And you use that in war, right? You're going to win battles, but you're not going to win the overall war, which is yourself. And the thing was like, when I said I became dark, was I embraced hate at a certain point. It became such a powerful tool in time of fear, right? So, but what hate did for me was I saw only darkness in the world. I hated myself. I hated everything. And that's not what life is about. Life is about experiencing the wholeness that comes with knowing who you are. Your root of your being, which is love, man, like creation. Like we're more powerful than hate. If you sit in the center of your being and avoid that place of emptiness, Lao Tzu, that place of void, there is the answer. I chose the light, So when I was in that place of dark, look, I sat for 8 years in this place
of darkness.
8 years. Can you imagine in the teachings of meditation to sit within dark? When I say darkness, and people don't understand what that means, is imagine every fear, every emotion that you felt that is painful, you're sitting with it in that place of void, and in the place of no thought, you're sitting with emotion and you're feeling all of that again, and because you're moving that emotion now, right? Because you're breathing into that lower abdominal, you're moving it out, you're exhaling it out. Because look, as human beings in today's world, we're not educated on how to release our traumas, are we? Like, that's why we're having such a mental health crisis in America. We don't understand how to move our traumas, like, to be anything more than who we are today. Like, we don't know how to do that. Besides like, oh, I'm gonna get up earlier and I'm gonna run on a trip. No, like how do you better yourself as a human being? Not just like titles and positions at work, chasing riches and fame. Like, who are you? Like, how do you better yourself as a human being? And what is the technique to that?
We had a trauma expert on, Dr. Dave Rabin from Apollo Neuro, and he talked about the systemic denial of our feelings. And, it's the thing that's keeping us stuck.
Mm.
So you've had two wars. You've had the external war that you fought, and you've also had a mental internal war. And so how do you win the mental internal war? And so for me, I'll just be more specific. Sometimes when I sit, it feels like an internal civil war. And the narrative is unbecoming, to say the least, and difficult to feel and observe, and that you go to places. But for me, I don't know if my experience is similar to yours. So how have you worked through, or how would you suggest others work through the internal war? And you might say there's no war internally. You don't have to agree with the premise.
No, there's a war, right? There's a war in ourselves every single day with negative thoughts, our beliefs, the exteriors and the outcomes that are outside of our control. Like there's a war inside our heads every day of thoughts.
And that war, to you, if you oversimplify it, sounds like what?
Emotions, right? So in trauma is like, okay, we push down our emotions to our lower abdominal, our gut, right? And then all it takes is a thought to activate that emotion. Right?
I'm not good enough. I can't get this done.
It's a bad morning. Well, it was a bad morning because, dude, we haven't had our coffee yet. Just simple narratives like that.
Yeah, right.
It's not a normal morning. Oh, because I woke up late, woke up early, and I have more time this morning instead of running out the door and driving sporadically to work, because I'm used to driving sporadically to work. Right? You're firing a neurological pathway often enough, and it becomes your state of being. I need this to experience this morning. I need to drink this coffee to experience this experience in the morning. I need to drive the world really sporadically because I'm used to that adrenaline, right? We program ourselves over and over in a narrative. And how do you break that narrative? That's the question, right?
That's the question.
So, the program is a program, right? So as a Green Beret, I look at the intelligence. I don't just hit an indigenous force. I look at the terrain, I look at the environment, I look at the people, the infrastructure, I look at their level of training, their equipment, their tactics, their history. I look at every data and I extract what is useful for me on how to effectively kill my enemies. So my enemy was me. So I started reading, studying data. How does the brain and everything gets connected? The power of journaling. A lot of like coaches, right? Mental coaches, they're like, journaling is like everything. And in the morning, you should write 3 things that you're grateful for. So I did, during my healing years, I would wake up in the morning, meditate, and then I'll write down 3 things I'm grateful for. My wife, my parents, my health. And what happens in time is you're changed in the narrative. So let's just say that something happened to you, right? And you can't get over it. 20 years later, that's still playing in your neurological pathway because that becomes your norm. That's your highway, right, of thoughts, repeated. It happens, there's cases that happens a whole lifetime. People can't get over their traumas. And let me tell you what it does health-wise. It pushes you to a fight or flight state, right? Because you're activating the anxieties and you're not present. And when you're not present, your immune system is not combating diseases. So you're killing yourself,
So you're an advocate for gratitude training, for journaling, for
If
meditation.
you train your body, right? Which you seem like you run, you work out at the gym, like you take pride in fitness. If you believe in fitness, then you need to understand that body and mind is connected. You have to train the mind. And the only way that you reach a level of fulfillment and happiness is you train the mind. The mind, this survival mind that was handed down to us over 200,000 years of human, this survivor's mind, it looks for the negative in the day. It's the survivor's mind. So you have to train the mind to be grateful. And that goes into journaling. So when I tell people like, okay, so let's say you have a bad day, right? I journal at night. So I have a bad day. And I write down that first I go into meditation, I breathe out the thoughts, I breathe out the emotion, I ground myself, and I pull out my journal and I write down the event that's bothering me. And this can be ongoing, right? So this is a practical exercise. You write down an event as is, not your narrative, what happened. And you write 1, 2, 3. 3 different narratives.
You're hijacking the narrative
of why that needed to happen.
That's right. Yeah, you're hijacking the loop that you're on.
Because if you change your narrative, right? And that's the thing we victimize ourselves all the time based on our narratives.
So a practice that I found to be meaningful is a little, like a 3-inch by 3-inch pad of paper, on my nightstand. And I call it a dump pad. And it's a way to dump the things that are running in my mind. I just write it down, but I'm going to add now your practice, which is 1, 2, 3. And those are 3 reasons that I needed to experience that mini trauma or that thing that's bothering me.
For the better.
For the better. So that is actually taking me off of the loop that I'm on. I'm just using the dump pad to just get it out of my mind, and I'll go think about it later, right? And you're saying, yeah, just do that now. 3 things of why I needed to experience that for the better. Yeah. Okay.
Because you're a survivor's mind. So let's just say today, we're walking around, 100 people say, Mike, I like your outfit, man. Looks good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then one guy said, what are you thinking? You're going to be stuck to that because you got a survivor's mind. It's the danger. Hey, pay attention to that.
Yeah, right.
He just insulted you.
That's the one that could eventually convert the other 100 to get you kicked out of the tribe. That's why we're so attuned to that negative bit of information. Because as humans, we conspire.
That's
right. We are social beings.
How we're programmed.
That's right.
And if you understand how you're programmed, you can beat the program. Just like the special forces. If I understand how you work, I can defeat you. If I know how you communicate in the jungles and how you push out your supplies to the front line and how these rebels work and how they guerrilla tactics work, I can probably kill you.
This is okay. You scare me right now. This is where, I think the harmony between your insights, the places you've gone, and the wisdoms that, or the wisdom you've worked through or to experience. So I have the same framing. If I understand you and I understand who you're working on becoming, I think I can help you. And so we're both talking about understanding.
Yes.
And I think you and I are in a place in our lives where we're both doing what I just said. If I can understand you and understand who you want to become, then maybe I can help you. But first, it's the same framing. If I can and because the objective was to kill the Bushido to intercept the sword. Do I have that right? Is I need to understand deeply, and then I can do the objective better. Okay, so I want to figure out a way that we can work together. And at the same time, you've got great clarity. You've been writing, and you've got the way of the modern samurai. And so, can you spend a moment and just open up modern samurai, what that means, and then I'd love if we could just quick hit the 7 principles.
So, a modern samurai, like the samurai came to me when I was very young, just kind of painting a picture as I was that weak refugee kid trying to make it in America, spit on, and then I saw like the code of Bushido. And, during the 80s, they had the big ninja kick. And so I'm like big samurai, right, guy. And it drew me into Shinto and the study of spirituality and Bushido.
So the religion, Shintoism?
Yeah, and how like a warrior plays in the path of religion. Like there is a relationship that a warrior.
How did you find Shinto? Because
samurai.
Samurai, because like it's one of the 11 world religions that people do not know about or talk about. So so your attraction to the samurai, the way of the samurai, led you to Shintoism.
Yeah, and then my attraction to Bruce Lee led me to Lao Tzu, Taoism.
Yeah, right.
And Confucius, right? Because he talks about that. So like my teaching stemmed, from those things.
So the first principle you have is rise before sun. Open that up just a little bit.
So, you know,
And is all of this in the Way of Ronin?
yeah, the
Is
Way
this
of Ronin.
this is
Yeah.
this is the writings that
Yeah.
okay.
And in fact, that's how I healed myself. Because look, if I tell you, we go in your room and you're like, Mike, why is your bed unmade?
Mm.
And you're like, I don't make my bed. Not a priority to me. And the thing is, that's not right or wrong. That's not right or wrong. The thing is, when you look at that unmade bed, is that your standard? Like, is that who you wish to be? And not right or wrong. If you're like, no, hey, then that's fine. But if you wish to be anything more than who you are today, then it starts with the day and that morning. So rise before the morning is like, you know, in today's world, we wake up and we're more reactive to the day. Right? You're running out of the house, you're almost late, like you're reactive. Like, what happened if I tell you, wake up early in the morning and let go of thought and exhale out the residue of emotion, because that's just energy. Let it out.
And how long of a meditation practice is that for you?
You know, for me, it's an hour now.
Whoa.
Yeah. I could sit all day in meditation.
Yeah.
And meditation is actually changing the chemistry in your brain.
Yeah.
And dropping your brain waves to, you know, beta mode, which is like sleep, daydreaming.
Theta.
Yeah, like daydreaming modes. So if you're present in that state where there's no thought or emotion.
There you go. Okay, so what time are you going to sleep? Just working backwards on the map.
9's when I try to wrap it up and go to bed.
And what time are you waking up?
I wake up at 4.
Okay, so you're getting a 8 hours of sleep,
Mhm.
7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Mhm.
So you're getting your proper. Okay, set an intention.
So like when it's for me, the samurais did this practice, and when I say samurais, they were Shinto was tied into Buddhism, right, which tied into the monks, and the monks reflected on death within the hours of darkness and light. The Tibetan monks would sit in the hour of death. So I don't go quite that extreme. I sit more like 10 minutes of death, where I would sit in that state when the sun. When in the darkness between darkness and light, when that sun crosses over, I think of death, right?
And is
death,
that a reverence for death?
Death is like, if this is the last day in earth, like, what are we going to do to like try to better ourselves? And what are we going to do to better the world? Like, if this is our last day.
Cool. And
right?
so that's just a quick little meditation you have.
Yeah.
Setting an intention.
Yeah. Knowing that this is transient. This physical life is transient.
All things are temporary.
Right. And this is temporary. Like, what to be given this opportunity called life. Like, seriously, like, Mike, think about like the endless universe. Like they're still seeing light particles from like the Big Bang, right?
Mhm.
Like, how endless is this universe? And the distance that the moon had to be from the sun, and the rotation that gives us in the waves, right? Like, it has to be precise. So what I'm saying, Lao Tzu said that nothing in this universe happens by accident. Everything is the way it is, and it is perfect.
So that's a first principle. And when you align with the world is not chaotic, there's harmony.
I understand that peace starts within me, and I have to right myself first. And I vibrate at the frequency of the universe, which is love. And if I vibrate at that frequency, I have to dump out all these thoughts and emotion that's man-made, right? So that's done in the mornings.
There you go. Totally have that.
Okay. So then intention is set after I think about death for like 10 minutes, you know, and then I'll pull out my notebook, and the intention is set for that day. Gratitude.
Can you give me an example of an intention, like a
powerful intention? Like, you know, I'm an entrepreneur these days. Is God give me strength to continue to do what I do, and this is who I want to be today.
This is who I want to be today. And you'll describe who you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
powerful. I want to be loyal. I want to be a great husband to my wife. I want to be a role model to my community. Like, I name it out.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I name out the things that, and I talk about, like, when I said intention is.
Wait, hold on. I'm watching you come back with motions right now.
Yeah.
this again is an unlock for me, is that just you calling up the man you want to be is not an intellectual exercise alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's an embedded emotional plus intellect.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts and mind and body are harmonized.
Mm-hmm.
So that also speaks to the power of your imagination and the power of how important it is to you.
Intention is a powerful thing.
There you go.
Because you are the creator. If I say that you believe in God and you know that God's inside of you and God created all things, you just got to vibrate at that frequency, which is love. Like there is a frequency. Shame vibrates at a frequency. So what I'm saying is love is a very powerful vibration. And if that's the energy that created all things, then you need to harmonize who you are within, past your thoughts and your illusions, right, of desire, what you think you want to be. Like if you let go of all that and vibrate at love, if you look at somebody and you just wish them the best, even though they're being a jerk, you wish them the best because you understand like we're all on this journey and we're all different phases in our journey, right? And if you surrender to the creator, then you understand that he, she, whatever the energy is, it's amazing. And it's beyond anything that we can ever replicate in words. And he is perfect, right? And he's going to make us perfect. So we have to surrender to that journey. But we don't because we attach, that goes into Buddhism, but we attach ourselves to desire, to illusions like fame and money is going to bring us happiness, right? It bring you joy at that moment.
One of my favorite Zen koans is the monk says to the student, "Do you want the good news or bad news?" And so bad news is that life is like falling through the air without anything to grasp or hold on to. The good news, there's no bottom. So
I like that.
Enjoy the ride, basically.
I
right?
like that.
So how do you principle 3, sharpen your sword? How do you do that?
You sharpen your sword by first developing a skill in life. Like what is your skill? And your skill should be defined by a purpose. Like, the way of the samurai is the way of two swords. Like two swords, only the samurai class, the warrior class can carry two swords. It was a symbol. If you are caught without those two swords, your head would be lobbed off your head because you're not in status of what it means to be a warrior. Two swords is in service of the daimyo, the Lord. So in the way of that two swords is develop a skill that's going to affect humanity. When I say affect humanity, it's the better humanity. For me, it was a warrior to fight for the oppressed, fight for the enslaved, where I came from, and to serve that higher power. So to develop a skill is to sharpen the sword, develop a skill. Okay, whatever that is. If you're an artist, if you're, a coach, whatever that skill is in your life, because everybody has their own individual journey. Okay, sharpen the mind. Like,
what are the mental skills you're most interested in?
A lot of like athletes, a lot of military guys, like the biggest hurdle that we face is ourselves. As in, like, you probably see an athlete that practices movement over and over and over and over. He's like one of the best at it. And in his head, he's going to fuck it up because of the emotion of failure. What happened if I tell you that that's an illusion and you let go of that thing because it don't serve you, right? And if you're like, you come to me and you're like, man, I'm not happy, right? I'm not happy because this, my dad treated me like this growing up. I'm not happy. What happened if I say, hey, man, it's not serving you, let it go?
Most people think that that's accurate, but don't know how to actually mechanically let it go.
And that's where a lot of my practice came from is, in theory, if this is trapped emotion, you should be able to let go of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know how to let go of emotion because we don't even know where it's trapped in our bodies. So in my study of mental health and the body and mind and energy, it goes into Kung Fu teaching as well. Qigong was a practice that they use to pull the energy from the earth, channel it into their qi, right, their state of being, and disperse it, and that was love, like the highest energy. So Kung Fu practice that channelization of energy. So if I tell you, like, if you're not living a life that like you're happy with, right, and happiness don't come from a survivor's mind, then you need a practice. You need a form, right? Because that's martial arts. Like, what is martial art? Proper form. So you need a proper form, and that begins with the day.
I love that. From form to formless is the first principle that matters to me. From
Yes.
like, so understanding form so you can create formless
Yeah.
at some point. And then so pursue Mushin, number 4.
Mushin, a lot of people compare Mushin to like muscle memory. And in a way it is muscle memory, but I want you to think deeper. In a state of zazen, right? In a state of no mind, zazen is to be totally present physically in form.
This
right?
is Zazen is the form that I actually
Yes.
study.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to be totally present, right? In the practice of Zazen, they'll talk about emptying one's mind. Can you imagine that? Like, to go into a breathing sequence where you can empty all thoughts. You're not thinking about anything. And if you are aware of your thoughts throughout the day, then you realize that we replicated like 70,000 thoughts throughout the day. And it goes everywhere, right? What happens if you control these thoughts and you make it serve you? Because each thought is tied to emotion, right? And if your survivor mind keep on thinking of negative thoughts, you're going to feel that negative emotion. But if your purpose is to be happy in life, then you got to change your thoughts. So it goes for changing your thoughts. So in Mushin, it's about being present as in the weaponry, in the state of close quarters battle, which is swords, right? Back then, it's close quarter engagement. The fear of death kicks in. Survival, fight or flight, like 200,000 years of evolution kicks in.
This is why I love action sports. It's not the highest form of risk, meaning military and operations of what you're doing, because it's still a luxury, but it forces a present moment focus. So does sitting in a pillow, doing some meditation, you can get there. But when you're at the edge of the cliff and you have a choice to make, think about my laundry or focus deeply on this line that's never been cut, in the back country. And if I miss that deep focus, I'm in trouble. There is a forcing function in environments of consequence, whether they're your environments or a lower level of it, in action sports or whatever. But so do you think that there's multiple ways to get to Mushin?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you saying double down on meditation to increase?
No, there's different ways to get to Mushin. Mushin needs to be practiced different, as it is two different subjects. This is my way of getting there. First is the action of the skill, right? So if we're talking about, weaponry, it's the action of that movement.
So the repetitive movement
it can be an
until
athlete,
it becomes neurologically completely wired.
mind and
Okay.
body,
Yeah,
right?
right. Okay.
So without thought, you can execute that movement. So now weaponry is done. I'm just comparing to a weapon. And then what meditation does, it allows you to empty thought, because thought is tied to emotion. Imagine if you're not feeling fear in the moment of battle. Like, you don't feel fear. So if I ask you to perform a task, sitting here talking to me, you're probably going to do better because there's no stress. But if I pull out a knife and I'm going to say, I'm going to stab you in the face,
You're scaring me again.
right? Unless you perform this movement within this time, your survival instincts kick in, but also fear is there. And when fear is present, it doesn't enhance your movements. It hinders your motor skills.
It'll keep you alive, but won't necessarily keep you, allow you to get into the slipstream.
Well, okay, so fight or flight, it shuts down certain motor skills, right? So if I have to have better vision, right? In a fight or flight situation, in a gunfight, I have to have better vision. It's going to shut down. It's going to increase my breathing.
That's right.
So I can get more oxygen to my brain. Subconsciously, things are changing chemistry wise in my body.
Technically, your attention goes internal
Yes.
more than you would like, and it goes narrow more than
Yes.
you would like. So that's why you lock onto one thing, and it could
Yes.
be a lock on of error.
Yeah.
And then we go internal too much.
Yeah.
So we miss the external frames
Yes.
in the way that we need to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, if you were to work with an athlete that was choking or was micro choking, really struggling out there, would you say that just practice the modern samurai principles, or would you have something specific that you would go after?
No. So if he's stuck in his mental head, right? So
His mental head. Yeah.
yeah, if he's stuck in that, he needs to go into a pattern of breathing technique right away.
You just start there. Yeah.
Right. So we do box breathing technique, and what it does, it increases the oxygen into your brain, changes the chemistry of your brain.
Are you like a 5-5-5-5 or 6-6-6-6?
For me, it's 5, 4, 8, 4. So I hold 4,
Yeah.
5 in,
Got it.
hold 4, 8 out.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And then next principle, and I'm mindful of our time, so I would just want to rip through these because they're so important. Prepare to die. And this is a samurai practice. And the idea that you think about the way that you want to die, not the method, but the experience you'd like to have at the moment of death, is a practice that has shaped me. And so is this how you're thinking about prepare to die, or do you think about it differently?
It depends on what state of death I'm focusing on, because death happens through our lives. Like
that's really cool.
You died to who you were in your 20s.
Yeah, that's a really cool thought.
But who you are in your 20s, right?
The world does not need a 20-year-old Mike Gervais.
Right?
Yeah, we don't need that.
They don't need a 20-year-old me anymore. But
right.
it made me who I was at that portion of my life. So you died at certain phases in your life.
That's cool.
There's just haven't been a physical death yet.
That's cool.
Right. And there's going to be one day a physical death. So the thing is, like, if I say to you that if you're chasing riches and fame, you're living off an illusion, which is temporary. What's the eternal?
That's right.
Right. What is that eternal energy? And if I'm saying that love is the creation, like that created all things, then if you live in the frequency of love, at that final moments in your life, and you reflect back on life and you're like, man, we lived a great life, man. Look at all the people we helped, and we made a difference. Imagine that being your final words, like, thank you.
That thought is so grounding and important to me that I don't want to have the final physical form and be anything other than graceful or kind. And I have to work my ass off for that, because I know that if I go unchecked and untrained, I'll live a life of anxiety and frustration and intolerance, and that will be my last breath as well.
Yes.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
I want the handshake to be kind, and so I have to train on a daily basis to have that kindness. And so that's
the samurais call it right mindness.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Modern samurai protects those who need it. I love that principle. And the last is stand by a code. What does that mean?
Like a lot of us, we just kind of walk through life like without a map. We just wander aimlessly through life without a blueprint, like what we want to be. Like, we let the externals influence who we are, right? Shaping us to who we are to be. Like, who are you in your being of who you are? Like, and how do you even know that unless you first live by a code that requires discipline every single day of your life to be that? Like, you even say, I want to die and I want to be this. Well, and you just said, I have to work my ass off every day. That's living by a code, right? So if you don't live by a code that's higher than yourself, you're going to slip down into survivor's mind, which seeks comfort.
There you go.
Right? You don't have like a blueprint.
What is your code? Like what is the code? Where do you draw your code from? Because it sounds like Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Shintoism, Christianity. Did I say Buddhism? Like, so you've got, and the way of samurai, like it sounds like you've sourced code from a lot of different ways, but I don't want to take that liberty.
No, yeah. I mean, like, what is a warrior? Like, people say to you, you speak of peace, you speak of God, like love, but yet you're a warrior. Like you had to kill, Right. And that's the thing was like a lot of my philosophy base is warrior based because warriors in the past had to live with this, like to kill.
So you are living the Bushido Code.
Well, I lived the Bushido Code in certain aspects, as in like, you know, when I say that is it ties you to a religion, like the warrior's path lives by a purpose of a higher self, which is tied to God, the creator.
Yep.
You know, so as a warrior, if I walked the path of Bushido, it was, hey, you're a dictator that's killing thousands of people. The universe aligned us up where my job is to take you out, and I have to live with that, like, and to understand how that ripples through the universe. Like, how does that affect lifetimes and generations? If I stand here as a human being and I watch this dictator kill, mutilate it, and hand his dictatorship to his son that continues to do the same, how many lifetimes have those people suffered? If I freed them, how many generations experience freedom after that? Like, and that to me is the way to warrior, is to understand the fine balance, like between humanity, God, like, what is our relationship between that? Because you are taking life.
Tu, you are living in alignment with the first principles of your life. You are definitely living. I feel it in this conversation, and I'm grateful to know you in this way. Thank you for being a warrior of good. And the Bushido Code is not lost on me. And I feel like I got to witness it and feel it here, which is, I'm just going to make sure I have these right. Courage.
Yes.
Compassion. Respect. Honor. Loyalty. Duty. Righteousness, which is about right-mindedness. And of course, self-control.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. I want to encourage people to follow what you're doing, both from a business standpoint as well as for your book that's coming out soon. And we'll have that posted, and we're definitely going to support it. The Way of Ronin.
The Way of Ronin. I want to explain what's the title mean. Right?
Ronin. Yeah.
The Way of Ronin. You know, the way is Confucius, right? It's to flow in harmony. It's Taoism. In religion, in Christianity, the way is God. You know, we call that. To me, is the way is to flow in harmony with the universe. The universe and our existence within this space is, we have a purpose. We're given life for a purpose, and we are to inject that purpose into this physical world. You know, we are to make a difference in this physical world. So the way to surrender, to flow. And Ronin came to me later on in life as to walk alone, to be masterless. And, you know, the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi was a Ronin. And he wrote the 21 principles of Dokudo, the way of walking alone. And that's what saved me after I got out of the military, was to be Ronin. To have the strength to walk alone and to sit within this space of void and to find the root of my being again, because I was surrounded by the hate of the world. So the only thing I felt was the hate. But when I sat with what has always been, that's where I found love, right? Creator, peace. And that's what I give back to the world. So that's why I named that book The Way of Ronin.
What a gift. Honored to know you and honored to spend time with you. I hope that, you know, this time that we spent together was as impactful to you as it even close to what it was for me. So I just want to say, I appreciate you.
Thank you. Arigato.